In today's video, I want to share with you how to sew more efficiently so that you can actually finish your projects, do them a little bit more quickly, while actually even improving the quality along the way too. In my first few years of sewing, I was down on the ground trying to cut and piece together my fabric. The spools of threads and bobbins were just rolling onto the floor, and all the pins that I dropped were getting stabbed into my feet. It felt like my sewing machine was constantly jamming and like nesting all the thread together. And I remember one time even my iron just face planted on my parents' carpet and just melted this dumb triangle into it. Basically, any project that got too frustrating or took longer than a day to complete, I would just sort of shove it into the back corner of a closet with just this emotional slurry of guilt and frustration and failure. So maybe you can unfortunately relate to this total chaos of a sewing project. And if you've tried sewing your own clothes, you know just how complex it is. You're basically turning this 2D object into a 3D object and using machines, zippers, elastics, thread, and iron, and you often need so much space just to be able to spread out and get the project done. And I think sewing is always going to be complex, but I also think there are tons of ways that we could tune up our processes to really reduce frustration or burnout mid-project and have things move a little bit more smooth and quick. The good news is that I don't think you really need a crazy fancy sewing studio or supplies to do this. About 3.5 years ago, I transitioned from sewing a couple garments for myself every year to sewing a few garments every week for my customers for my small business, Darwin Textiles. But I'm still working with home sewing machines in a relatively small little craft room, just probably like many of you are. Of course, I definitely think you could and you will learn how to be more efficient just through trial and error over time. But with this video, I'm hoping to sort of speed up that process for you, make your journey towards efficiency a little bit more efficient. So first, I'm just going to walk you through some tips and tricks that cost essentially $0 to try out. And then I'm going to introduce you to some of my most favorite tools that cost just a little bit of money, but have had a huge impact on how quickly and accurately I can sew my clothing. Okay, let's do it. Let's start with just some quick techniques. So tip number 1, I like to spool all of my bobbins at once at the beginning of a sewing project, because there have been many times where I'm mid-project and the bobbin thread runs out and I literally just stand up and walk away, which can be a total buzzkill on the project, obviously. So depending on the size of your typical project, maybe try threading like 2 to 3 bobbins all at once in the color or colors that you're going to need. Tip number 2 is to adjust your sewing pattern by height before sewing the whole garment. I think it saves time spent on tailoring later and gets the proportions a little more accurate along the way. If you want to get really precise calculations of how much you should adjust your sewing pattern by, you can try my height adjustment calculator over at charliedarwintextiles.com. It tells you proportionally how much to add or subtract from different pattern pieces. And I've got another video right here on how to use it. Tip number 3 is to take lots of notes on the pattern, the fit. Note the date when you make any changes to it. This really helps take the guesswork out of it. I know it seems like an extra step up front, but you're going to spend so much time later trying to remember what you did. So if you come back to it again at a later date, or you come and remake the whole garment, which I promise the second time you make anything will go way smoother, way more efficiently. The first one is always the worst. But I also promise that if you make changes on your first time around and you think you can just keep them stored up in your head permanently, you're totally fooling yourself. Taking notes has honestly been a major game changer for me. Tip number 4, to keep your space tidy as you go, you might try keeping a box down by your feet at your cutting table, your ironing table, and just throw your scraps down there as you go. Keep them all in this little box, and then you can go through them at the end and decide if there's some good scraps to pull back out and keep, but otherwise just dump the box or keep it as stuffing for a cushion or some upcycling later. Tip number 5, save time looking back into your sewing machine manual by just labeling your sewing machine with all the details that you can't usually remember. You can always put down a piece of transparent tape and write on top with a Sharpie. Tip number 6. Avoid the dreaded unthreaded needle. I had this issue where so many times I'd go to start stitching and my thread would pull straight out of the needle and just get sucked into the machine. And it totally helps, I think, to get into the habit of just every time before you go to sew, pull the thread down below and behind the presser foot before you start stitching, so it doesn't unthread or bunch when you start. Tip number 7. Make adding buttons way easier by taping them in place on your garment before sewing them. We only have 2 hands and goddammit, slippery buttons can go straight to hell. Alright, so these next tips have to do with tools I invested in that have really revolutionized how quickly and efficiently I can sew. Some of them cost just a couple dollars, some of them cost a couple $100s. The first one is a bin organizer to separate sewing projects so I can really easily take breaks and keep them from getting shoved into a dirty corner or the depths of a closet. And a sub tip here, so you don't lose smaller pieces along the way or get them mixed in with your scrap pile, you can keep smaller pieces held together with safety pins. Tool number 2 is having an iron that doesn't turn off for a long period of time. I have the Chi titanium iron and it times out after 30 minutes of inaction when it's standing up. This way, if I have a lengthy sewing step, I don't have to wait for it to reheat back up and continue working. Tool number 3 is having a table that doubles as my ironing and cutting table. And it folds up really small if I need it to tuck it to the side. It first of all elevates me up off the ground, which is great for my posture, but honestly it's like really a one-stop shop for all it can do for me. I'll do a full review of this setup in a future video, but basically for this table you can purchase an add-on padded ironing surface to go on top of the table, and you can easily remove this whenever you need to. And I use this ironing surface along with an electric rotary cutter, which this is my number 1 tip for this whole video. If you're ready to invest in something that makes the whole thing more fun, quick, easy, an electric rotary cutter is amazing. It's pretty nimble and it cuts through several layers of fabric at once. I've used the same blade on hundreds of garments over a few years and have never had to change it, because it has this tool on it that makes it self-sharpening. And if I am going to use a traditional rotary cutter, I can always bring over my smaller mat to lay on top of the ironing surface, or my giant mat that I got from Joann's to cover the whole surface, but I honestly rarely ever use these two. This whole setup saves space, saves backaches, saves tons of time moving between a cutting table and an ironing table, and I keep it near my sewing table as well. Tool number 4 is a magnetic pin holder. This one was actually originally marketed for people needing to hold nails and screws, but I have co-opted it to my needs. And what it does is keep all your pins near you at all times so you can grab them and put them back super easily. I wear it on my non-dominant wrist so I can grab the pins with my dominant hand. Tool number 5. If you sew garments that incorporate bias tape at all, you might love a bias tape maker. This tool gives you way more precise folds in a much shorter time. Tool number 6, the big one, the obvious, my sewing machine. It's a Singer heavy duty and it is a beast. It sews fast and is really durable. And it is, knock on wood, never broken or ever gotten weird on me in 5 years. I recommend it because it really powers through all sorts of projects without any issues. And it has the features that I need, like special stitches, a button and buttonhole foot, invisible zipper foot. But it's still kept rather simple in design, which I really like about it. And it's on the more affordable end of sewing machine pricing. Tool number 7. This one you've probably heard a lot, but a serger or overlock machine, which is different than a regular sewing machine. It can really drastically improve the speed that you can finish seams. And because linen, the fabric I work with, frays so much, I find that the serger is really critical to giving me higher quality and more durable garments without sacrificing much time at all. Tool number 8. Have multiple pairs of scissors laying around. Just take the plunge, have one pair by your ironing table, one pair at your sewing machine, and another pair for when both of those get lost in the mix. And I also find that these little snips are really great to have by the sewing machine. All right, thanks so much for sticking around for all 15 tips. These are just some of the ways that I've improved my efficiency when sewing clothing, but I really honestly want to learn some stuff from you too now. So let me know in the comments a technique that you've tried or a tool that you've used that has really improved your efficiency in your sewing practice. Or maybe you're just like a total mess or a total beginner and you don't have any tips to contribute yet. Then just let me know in the comments which of my tips you're most excited to try out. If you'd like to start a new project where I give you the step-by-step guidance to finish a really high-quality garment in a more low chaos kind of way, then check out my sewing patterns over at charliedarwintextiles.com/patterns. I've just released a new pattern, the Gypsy Moth. It's a tiered maxi dress with a V neckline. It has shoulder and underarm ties. So much fun in the summer, in the hot weather. And I think it'd be a really fun project to try out some of these efficiency tips on. Thanks so much for being here. Give this video a thumbs up if it sparked something for you, and do hit subscribe if you want to stay up to date on more sewing tips, tutorials, behind the scenes of my little handmade linen clothing business, all that and more. All right, happy sewing. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.